Okay, so what we had started talking about on Monday was these models. And we wanted to look at some important models. And like I said, we were going to look primarily at a few different models, one of them being the ADAS model. Keynesian model is what we're going to focus on. And to a little bit the classical model. Right? And they all have their advantages and they all have their disadvantages. And they all have some things that are assumptions about them that are correct, and they all have assumptions about them that maybe could be a bit of a stretch. But they're a useful tool. And what we can do, of course, is we can change the assumptions of these models and we can put them into each other using the assumptions of the ADAS model, basically putting them into a Keynesian framework, or taking the assumptions of the Keynesian model and put them into an ADAS framework to compare results between them to kind of see how they compare, right? So let's start off with the ADAS model. It's the simplest model. And like its name says, it's based upon aggregate demand and aggregate supply. So when you think of demand and supply, what do you think of? The thing that we've been drawing all semester long, right? We've been drawing something that kind of looks like this, where we have our quantity here, and we've got our price over here, and we've said here's demand and here's supply, and this is the market for, say, cars, right? And so we've got some quantity, whatever this amount is, say Q1, and we've got some price here, say P1. And we said, oh, look, here's the supply and demand model for cars, and what happens when income goes up, or what happens when the price of gas goes down, or what happens when the union workers get a raise, or what happens when the price of electricity changes, etc. But there's also other models too, right? There are markets for music, right? So here's the demand for music, and here's the supply of music, and there's some quantity Q1, and there's some price P1, right? And there's markets for steaks, right? And here's our quantity, and here's our price, and here's the demand for steaks, and here's the supply of steaks, and there's some quantity, and there's some price. Right? And there's a market for healthcare, right? So you got some quantity of healthcare, and you've got some demand for healthcare, and you've got some supply of healthcare, and you've got some price. And you have some quantity and some price, etc. Right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, on and on and on and on for all of these different types of models, blah, 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 blah. And we actually had a name for one of these aggregations, and we called that guy basically GDP. We said, well, GDP is basically a lot of these market values, right? What GDP was is we said, we're going to aggregate all of the stuff that we create, the market value of all that stuff, and we're going to add it all up together. We're going to call that something. Let's just call it GDP. And to a degree, when we're looking at the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model, that's exactly what we're doing. We're going to aggregate all of these demand curves, and we're going to aggregate all of these supply curves, and we have aggregate demand and aggregate supply. But you can't have an individual price here, right? That wouldn't make any sense. So rather than having price, we have the price index, right? What are prices on average doing? And the same thing down here for quantity, right? You can't have the quantity of healthcare, the quantity of steaks, etc. You have to aggregate all of that stuff, right? So down here we have basically real output. So we've got this same kind of Q, the amount of stuff that we're making. Well, that's exactly what we're making here, real output. We've got these different prices here for these different markets. But when we aggregate all that, you can't have that. You got to have something that's more aggregated, like a price index, right? And when we're looking at our aggregate demand curve, what do you think the aggregate demand curve is going to look like? What do you think that guy's going to look like? Exactly. He's going to look just like the other ones. Now we know why these guys slope down. These guys slope down because of these income and substitution effects. All right. So what we want to know is, well, why does this guy slope down, right? Well, he slopes down for similar reasons, right? So the income effect said, hey, you can think of it like this. If prices decrease, the money in your wallet can buy more stuff. Right? Well, there's the real balance effect over here. So here we have our price index. Our price index here is 100. And then here it drops to, say, 90. And this is some level of output. I'm going to call it, I don't want to call it Q. I'll call it Q. We've got Q1 and Q2 here, some level of output, right? And if the price index falls to 90 from 100, what does that mean? It means prices on average have done what? They've fallen 10%, right? So here's your car selling for $30,000. Now it's selling for $26,500. And here's gas that was $3 and now it's selling for $2.73, right? Not quite 10%, but on average, prices are decreasing 10%. Which means if you've got a whole bunch of money sitting in the bank, what does that mean? That money now buys more stuff, right? The exact opposite happens with inflation, right? You got a whole bunch of money sitting in the bank. If prices go from 90 to 100, that money sitting in the bank now on average buys less. That's what inflation is. Inflation is your money buys less over time as time goes by, right? It's decreasing in value. It's purchasing power, right? So here we have our price index falling from 90 to 100. Prices on average are decreasing. So here we have this real balance effect. So as the price level decreases, real assets can purchase more output, right? Our assets can purchase more output. We can have this increase here in our ability to purchase goods and services. We also have that's similar, that's related to this, is this interest rate effect. Now what this interest rate effect says, right, so we have this decrease in purchasing power, so this price level falls. Firms and households, remember households is HH, and governments, by that way. Bless you. Need less money to purchase goods and services, right? So if they're needing less money to purchase goods and services, some of this additional money gets moved into savings. Is it hot in here? Is it hot in here? So if this money is going into savings, what's happening in the market for savings? See, the people in the video are like, ha ha, I'm sitting in my mom's basement in my underwear watching the nine. You guys are all in the heat and stuff at 8 o'clock in the morning. They're like, who's the sucker now? So if we have this stuff going into savings, and yeah, I'm going to leave that part in too. So if we have this in savings, here's our quantity of money, basically. And here's the demand. Here's, or let's call it loanable funds. It's a better word for it. Here's the quantity of our loanable funds. What would the price of loanable funds be? What would this guy be? People's demand for loans, people's supply of loans, what would that be? What would the price on that?
Interest?
There you go. So here's your interest rate, right? So you're at some interest rate, I1, Q1. Right? Price index falls, people need less money to do the exact same things that they did before. You have this additional monies that goes into savings, the supply of loanable funds increases. This guy falls to I2, and we can see increases once again in real output. Why would we see increases in real output if the interest rate's falling? What do you think would be changing if interest rates are falling? Price level falls, people need less money to make the same purchases. We take some of those additional purchases, put them into the loanable funds market. Supply of loanable funds increases, interest rates fall. If interest rates are falling, what's happening to other things? What could people do? They can buy more stuff, right? So consumption increases, right? So we're seeing consumption go up, especially for things that are interest sensitive, cars, washing machines and dryers if you finance them, all of that stuff, right? I mean, have you ever gone to the store and you're buying something, and then when you're checking out, they say, would you like to apply for the credit card from store XYZ? We'll give you 20% off right now. And people say, yeah, sure, or whatever, right? That's credit, right? And what are the things that determine those credits, those interest rates? If those interest rates are falling, you're more likely to sit there and purchase more stuff, right? And at the exact same time, you would also see investment increasing, right? So we have this real balance effect, and we have this interest rate effect, and these two guys are kind of related to this guy, right? Basically, the money in our wallet, our assets, purchases more stuff, basically because it just purchases more stuff. And then, of course, you also see these declines in the interest rate. But we also have this international substitution effect. So the international substitution effect here says, hey, as the price level falls, foreigners purchase more of our goods and services. And what would be changing here? If foreigners are purchasing more of our goods and services, what would be changing here? International. Exactly. Our exports rise. People are buying more of our stuff because it's cheaper. Okay. So when we were looking over here at these markets, we said, hey, if we have an increase in demand for cars, this guy is going to shift. The whole demand curve shifts. And if we have an increase in demand, was this guy shifting left or was he shifting right? He was shifting right, all right? So here was your increase in demand. Similarly, we said, hey, if the demand for music is decreasing, how would this guy shift? This guy's going to shift left. All right. If we have an increase in aggregate demand, how do you think our aggregate demand curve is going to shift? Mm-hmm. So here is an increase in aggregate demand, right? This guy shifts to the right. If we had similarly a decrease in aggregate demand, how do you think this guy would be shifting? Shifting to the left. Same thing as he did over here, right? So here would be our decrease in aggregate demand. Right? This is why we spent so much time going over supply and demand. As like I said, I mean, this guy, if you have a really good understanding of what's happening in supply and demand markets, you're going to see the exact same thing all over again when we talk about aggregate demand. You're going to see the exact same thing all over again when you're talking about aggregate expenditures in the Keynesian model. The stuff just doesn't go away. That's why we wanted to make sure that we spent so much time understanding this basic model, because it's the basic model for a whole bunch of different things. So we know what makes the demand curve slope down. That's our income and substitution effects, right? We know what makes the aggregate demand curve slope down. We've got this real balance, this interest rate effect, and this international substitution effect. And we know what makes this guy shift, right? We had things like changes in income and changes in preferences and changes in the price of related goods and all this other kind of stuff. But what we want to know now is what makes this guy shift? What makes aggregate demand increase or decrease, right? And we've got several different things here that are occurring. So one of them is changes in real wealth. And these are changes in real wealth that are not related to the real balance effect, right? They're exogenous. So this could be things that change real wealth. So you could have things like housing bubbles, right? That pop, right? I mean, that's what happened about 10 years ago. The value of people's real assets fell, right? Or you could have like a stock market surge. Kind of like what you're having now. Right? So here you're seeing changes in real wealth that are not because of this change in the real balance effect, right? People's assets just grow. We also have changes in the real interest rate. right? And I'm assuming that it's obvious that if real wealth here is increasing, aggregate demand's increasing and vice versa, right? Here you're having these changes in the real interest rate. Once again, different from the interest rate effect. These are changes in the interest rate that are exogenous. Okay? They're not happening. The interest rates aren't changing because the price level is changing. The interest rates are just changing on their own. So here we see changes in the real interest rate, right? So as interest rates increase or decrease, as interest rates increase, right, you're going to see aggregate demand basically decreasing, and vice versa, right? As interest rates are falling, you're going to see aggregate demand rising. So you could have things like this happening from changes like, say, in the money supply that the Fed does. We've also got firm and household expectations. Right? In other words, if firms and households expect a recession to occur, they'll make their expectations come true. Right? So if people expect good times, right, they're going to act that way, they're going to spend, they'll make aggregate demand increase. If people expect a recession, they'll act that way, they'll start decreasing spending. And if enough people do that, you'll actually cause a recession. You'll cause the very same thing that you were expecting. We also have our expected rate of inflation. If people expect the rate of inflation to increase, how do you think they might respond today? I expect prices to go up in the future, and I expect them to go up even faster in the future than they are today. Yeah, buy more today, right? So you're going to see aggregate demand today increasing, right? Similarly, if you expect the rate of inflation to fall in the future, why do that? All right? So you'd see aggregate demand declining. We have changes in foreign income. If foreign income goes up, what would people in those other countries do? Exactly. And some of the stuff that they're going to buy, you're going to see foreign consumption increasing. And some of the stuff that they're going to buy is going to be what? That's related to us. Our exports, exactly. So if we see foreign income going up, foreign consumption increases, and by definition, right, our exports are going to increase. Last one here is changes in exchange rates. All right. So if we see changes in the exchange rates, we're going to see changes in exports or our imports. Let's look at an example. So all that the exchange rate is the price of one currency in the form of another. And do you think we would want a strong dollar, or do you think we'd want a weak dollar? Because it sounds right, right? Who wants a weak dollar, right? Why would you want that? So let's assume we've got the exchange rate as such that $2 is equal to 1 British pound, okay? And here's our exchange rate. And here's the price of our hot dogs, right? So we've got hot dogs over here in the US. For $2. Or we have the price of a hot dog at 1 pound. Okay. So let's think very, very carefully about what this guy says. Here I am, I'm walking around England. I've got a pound, right? I can walk up to the hot dog stand, I can take my pound and I can give it to the guy and I get a hot dog. Or I can take my pound, get on a plane, fly to America, take my pound, turn it into $2, take my $2 to the hot dog stand and buy a hot dog. The hot dog costs the same in both countries. Now let's assume that the exchange rate changes to this. $1 now buys 1 pound. Okay? So here it is, I've got 1 pound, right? I can take my pound and I can go to the guy in England and I can buy a hot dog. Or I can take my pound and get on a plane, fly to America, take my pound, turn it into $1 US and do what? Not buy a hot dog, because the hot dogs are $2, they're not $1. I need 2 pounds. So if the exchange rate changes to this, from $2 buying 1 pound to $1 buying 1 pound, what are people in Britain going to do? Not buy our hot dogs. And here's what we could do in the US. We're walking around in the US at this exchange rate. I got $2. I can take my $2, I can walk down to the hot dog stand and get a hot dog. Or I can take my $2, get on a plane, fly to England, turn my $2 into 1 pound and buy a hot dog. If the exchange rate changes to this, I've got my same $2, take my $2, buy 1 hot dog in the US, or take my $2, get on a plane, fly to the US, take my $2 US, turn them into 2 pounds, and buy 2 hot dogs. So when we see the exchange rate doing this, we're going to see our exports doing what? Decreasing our imports increasing. What has the dollar done here? It used to take $2 to buy 1 pound. Now it only takes $1 to buy a pound. What did the dollar do? It got stronger. It appreciated. This stronger dollar means our exports are now more expensive. So our exports are actually going to go down. Our imports are actually going to go up. So if we're wanting to if we have a problem with a trade imbalance and we want to fix that, what do we want? We don't want a strong dollar, we want a weak dollar, all right? Because if you have this weak dollar, This is called depreciation. Here you're going to see exports going up. You're going to see imports going down. Our goods and services are now relatively cheaper than other people's. When was the last time you heard a politician say we want a weak dollar? Have you ever heard a politician say that? But that's exactly what you want. And the reason they don't say that is because why? It sounds bad, but it's not. It's the exact opposite. If this is the only thing you're interested in, right? And apparently that's what a lot of people are interested in, right? Because we have a president who promised to do just this. Well, the only way to do that is to have a weak dollar. He didn't say, we're going to have a weak dollar. Did he campaign on that? Nope. If exchange rates sound counterintuitive, that's okay. I got to think about them because it's the price of one currency in terms of another, right? Because you can just as easily have the exchange rate be this, dollars per pounds, and you could also have this. And it's just a matter of how you want to look at it, right? And so here, if this guy's going from 2 to 1 and this guy's going from 2 to 1, well, one, it's appreciating, one, it's depreciating, right? You have to sit there and you have to kind of think about it for a second. And both of these are acceptable. You can price pounds in terms of dollars, or you can price dollars in terms of pounds. You can price dollars in terms of euros, or you can price euros in terms of dollars. You can do either way. So you have to sit there and think about how is this being priced. Is it dollars to pounds, or is it pounds to dollars? So don't let that discourage you. Okay. So let's look at aggregate supply. So here's our quantity of real output. Here's our price index. Here's our short-run aggregate supply curve, okay? And you'll notice I didn't just call it aggregate supply, I called it the short run, because there's a short run and there's a long run. And let's make this distinction between short run and long run. If you've had principles of micro, and I don't know if anybody in here has, in the short run, what's the short run in principles of micro? What's that time frame considered? Anybody had principles of micro? So what's the short run? Don't remember? So in micro, the short run was when at least one output was fixed. Or not one output, one input. All right. The long run was when all inputs could be changed. We've got an example of that right over here. The university wants to expand classroom resources. They can't just do that tomorrow. It takes time to do that, right? And so in the short run, They've got inputs that are fixed. There's only so much building space available. In the long run, they can do things, right? They can expand Glass Hall. They can tear down Glass Hall, build something else. They can tear down all the buildings and rebuild them all into one giant building. You can do anything that you want to do in the long run. But in the short run, at least one input is fixed, right? In macro, when we're looking at this guy, when we're talking about the short run, we're talking about basically input prices. Right? And I sign a contract. The contract says I'm going to be paid this amount of dollars for the 2017-2018 school year. That's fixed. That's the short run. In the long run, though, the input price can be anything, right? In the short run, here's my salary. My salary is this for 2017, 2018. What's it going to be for the long run, 30 years from now? I certainly hope it's not the same amount of money that it is today. Right? Although I've been working for Missouri State for a long time, so I know that's probably true. Right? Same thing for you guys, right? I mean, you guys get paid, you have a job, what do you get paid? $8 an hour. Do you expect that to change tomorrow? No, right? It's going to be the same. It's the job that you have. Is that going to, whatever job it is, and I'm not saying that Ashley's going to be in that same job 10 years from now, but somebody else will be different in that same job, right? What are they going to get paid $8 an hour for that? No, it'll be something different, right? $9.50 or $10 or $12 or $4.78 or whatever the number is, it'll be different. So we have this short run, input prices are fixed. In our long run, all of these input prices can change, okay? So let's think about what's happening here. Because we know why this aggregate demand curve is sloping down. We have this real balance effect, and we have this interest rate effect, and we have this international substitution effect. All right, so here is our price level. We said, oh, look, prices are 100, Q1, and prices fall on average 10%. We go to this guy, Q2. Let's think about what happens here. We've got some price level 90. We're just making some amount of output, whatever that guy is. We're just making Q1 level of output. Now, all of a sudden, for whatever reason, prices go up. Remember, this is our price index. So they're going up about 11%, right? They're going up from 90 to 100. For some reason, on average, all prices tomorrow go up 11%. But the input prices are fixed. The output prices are increasing. The input prices are staying the same. What does that mean for the firms? They're making more money. Profits have gone up. That's exactly what it means. So what this means is that in the short run, these input prices are fixed, but output prices can change, right? I mean, that's what MSU says. Here's my price. My salary starts July 1. Actually, it starts August. So here it is, August 2017. And then here it is, August 2018. And I'm paid the exact same amount every single month. Our prices staying the same every single month, and then all of a sudden in July of 2018 to August 2018, they go up 2%? No, they're going up continuously throughout the year, right? Every single month that goes by, my real salary is doing what? It goes down, right? Every single month that goes by, because stuff costs more, slightly more, in April of 2018 than it did in August of 2017. My real wage is decreasing slightly every single month. All right? It's the same thing happening here. Prices go up, but the input prices are fixed. How do firms respond to that? Oh, crap, let's make more stuff. Profits are increasing. All right? And when we're making more stuff, we're going to go from this Q1 up here to this guy up here, Q2. Now, is it going to stay that way? If Missouri State said, here's your salary, salary X dollars. Not X real dollars, X nominal dollars. And we're going to pay you X nominal dollars till you're done in 20 years. Or whenever I get $1 million in the bank and the house is paid for, whichever comes first. What would people say if this is the way it was going to be? What would they do? Okay, that sounds good. Is that what people would say? No. They're going to say, I need a raise. You got to give me more money. My real wage is falling. Prices are increasing. My nominal wage is staying the same. My real wage is decreasing. You have to pay me more. That's where this guy comes from. All right? And we'll see what that long-run aggregate supply curve looks like and the things that could make this guy increase or decrease on Friday.